Welcome. This is a recording for this session connected into social justice. And in particular, my name is Christopher West. I'm a faculty member at Pasadena City College. There are two other persons on the panel. One is Leticia Rojas, and the second one is Robert Acevas. Our facilitator is Sofia Acevedo, and I will turn it back over to her to introduce herself, and then we'll continue, and thank you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the panel. Again, my name is Sophia, like Christopher just said. Christopher is answering the question, what is your career or career path, and what made you decide on your career?
So going back, so for me, an undergraduate, the most important part was the breadth of experiences, taking a wide range of courses to try to figure out what your passion is going to be. Come in NAACP Legal Defense Fund with a passion to go into law, did poli-sci, did legal studies, found that it wasn't what I was connecting into. And to give you a sense of why mentorship is so critically important, the guy's name is Leon Litwack. In the contemporary moment, it would make no sense that an older white male who studies Southern history and teaches African American history would be somebody who I would connect into. But he walked into every class and we gave him a standing ovation after every lecture. And there was a tear after every lecture because he simply told stories well. The rest of my career has been, I just want to tell stories well. I did diversity consulting business for about 15 years up and down the West Coast from Washington all the way to California. I started that in undergraduate. Again, why internships are so critically important. I transitioned into the museum field. I served for about 5 years as a museum curator. And now I'm currently in my 12th year as a faculty member at the college. And I also run some programming for the institution as well. The most important narrative in all of that is a single thing that started in undergraduate, which is I just want to tell good stories. And so figuring out what the career is going to be is separate from figuring out what your passion is going to be and what moves you and what moves other people connected to you. For me, it's connected into stories, and we'll talk more about the social justice component to that as well. I'll turn to Robert. Thank you. I will, Leticia, because you didn't get recorded, and Robert. Thank you.
Sure, I'll talk a little, and sorry for folks that are listening to this twice, a little bit of my career path. So I am currently faculty member at PCC in education, but prior to that, I did 10 years of teaching high school. And what I was saying was that what kind of brought me to that career was my experiences in undergrad. I took Chicano studies and ethnic studies courses, women's studies courses, and really felt like what I wanted to do with my career and future had to be embedded in community. And I wanted specifically to work with students of color, all students, but specifically to work with students of color around college attainment, college access. So I moved to Los Angeles from the Bay Area and did my teacher ed program at UCLA and taught for 10 years at Roosevelt High School in the Boyle Heights, East Los Angeles area. And then what I was saying was that I feel like my journey to teaching also stems from my family. My mom wanted to be a teacher, but only went to the 6th grade in Mexico, and my grandfather didn't want to pay for her education. You know, at that point, you had to pay for books, and they lived in a pretty small town. And so I think in a lot of ways, I grew up around informal teachers, and I feel like my story and the stories of my sisters, I have 3 sisters, are a continuation of where what my parents wanted for themselves and for us. And so for me, teaching is more than just a job. It's been kind of a calling of sorts. And then if you want to share, Robert.
Yeah, I'll share. What's up, everyone? It's nice to see some familiar faces. My name is Robert. Pronouns are he, him, his, él. I would say, so I'm new to this. I'm just starting, I guess, my career exploration. I recently graduated from UC Santa Barbara, majored in Chicanic Studies. I'm a PCC alum. I got my AA in psychology and social and behavioral sciences. So I would say for me, my career path would be, I'm an aspiring student affairs professional. So I think that I kind of went this route, or I did go this route because a lot of it ties back to kind of my upbringing. I'm the first in my family. I have 3 older sisters and 1 younger brother my brother, the younger me, he graduated. My 3 older sisters, for personal reasons, they did not get to graduate high school. So I'm the first to graduate high school and receive my BA. but just alone, and I live in Northwest Pasadena. Not sure if any of you are familiar, but I live in Kings Villages. Historically, it's a community that has received a lot of negative stereotypes of drugs and gang violence. And just looking back at the youth, and I think so far I have been very fortunate with the experiences I've been giving and opportunities that I've been given. So just looking back at how I was raised and kind of the experiences that I went through growing up, there's no reason why, and this kind of ties back into the social justice part, but the reason why I went on this career path to be aspiring student affairs professional is because I look back, now that I'm back home at my parents' house, I see that a lot of youth are getting into gangs, or they're just doing activities that can end them up in wrong places, or they're just hanging out with the wrong crowd. And since I've been fortunate to pursue post-secondary education, I see the importance of coming back. And I think what drives me is I've always been community driven. I've always wanted to give back to my community and those who have helped me to get where I am today. So yeah, I think that's a little bit about me. I'm not an established professional as the other two in the panel. But I'm happy to be here and share about my experience and kind of what's been working for me. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, so my next question is for Leticia. I know you kind of went in a little bit about it, but could you explain a little further who or what helped you along the way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I always talk about family because I think, especially if you are very kind of family oriented, you come into careers and career decisions kind of as a team sometimes. But aside from my family, I think teachers definitely had a huge influence in me wanting to pursue teaching. I was lucky enough to have a couple of teachers early on in really middle school, high school, who I aspired to at least emulate, and really I appreciated the way that they created experiences for us where they treated us like adults, right? It felt like even though we were 15, 16, we were engaged in really quality conversations. But most of the folks who really shaped me were really at the college and beyond level. Some of my friends who are organizers have shaped the ways in which I approach teaching. So it's not just I want to be a teacher, and I was an English teacher, not just because I love literature and I could talk about books for days, but because I saw teaching as an opportunity to bring in some of the conversations that I think need to be happening with young folks and beyond. And so some of the folks who have shaped my kind of pedagogy are actually not in teaching, that are doing amazing work in law and other fields. And so I've taken pieces of what they've taught me along the way. And honestly, just friendships that I've made along the way. So if you're going to be a teacher, make friends with teachers who you share philosophy with and a vision for, and stay away from the folks who are not wanting to teach anymore. Right. And I think for me, it kept me very grounded so that if I did start to kind of complain a little and kind of start to slip, I had friends who could call me out a little bit, which I was grateful for.
What about you, Professor West? Who influenced you along the way?
There are two men, actually. One is the current number 2 at the college, which is Dr. Robert Bell. And a guy by the name of Harrison Sims. Harrison is non-traditional. I met him before he passed away in his 50th year, and I was 20, 21, couldn't figure out what was going on with my life. And he's an individual who I saw had been connected to community, was running an incredible sort of group of diversity professionals out of Oakland who've been doing this work for about 5 years. And before he passed, he said, "Look, you got it, whatever." Man, and I had no idea what that meant. I'm still struggling to figure out what he exactly meant by "you got it." The second is Robert Bell. He hired me at the University of Southern California into a position that was master's degree preferred. At that point, I only had a bachelor's degree. And I was in my end of my 3rd year here at the college, planning on leaving for a range of different reasons, And he arrived at the institution who created a space for me able to persist. So to me, those are very critical situations. It's about building relationships. It's also about making sure that you never have any clear idea about exactly who is going to be the person that is going to change your life. And so assume that every individual, I teach my class in the following way. One of you is going to hire me at some point, and every time I lecture, I'm interviewing for. I hope I do a decent job, and I hope you give me the job when I'm done. I don't mean that lightly. I don't mean that to be cute. I mean that in a way that if I'm presenting myself in a way that I'm still hungry, I'm still passionate about, I still have to make it happen, then at least that demonstrates to you that that's what is necessary to be able to make it happen. And that's my shtick.
Sounds like you're talking about always just putting your best foot forward.
Yeah.
And just like, yeah, being very presentable. Yeah, okay. What about you, Robert? Who helped you, influence you along the way?
Yeah, so of course my family is a given. I come from two parents who immigrated from Mexico. Because I'm the first to graduate high school and now graduate from college, their support was always more financially, although I grew up low income. They did whatever they could to provide the money for whatever it was, the best that they can. But definitely I think the greatest support would be, I was part of Upward Bound. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Upward Bound or just with Trio. They do amazing work. I came across Upward Bound going into my senior year in high school. And I remember that summer I was stubborn, I was naive, I did not want to be in the program. But thankfully they pushed and they got through to me. And ever since then, it's been a really close relationship. My first year of college, I went to Chico State. Things didn't work out. I knew that I was a city boy. I couldn't be out there. So I decided to come back. And through this whole process and this journey that I'm still going through and I'm growing from, they've always managed to be there with any question that I have. The mentor that I met, their staff has changed since I was in the program. So as the structure of the program, but I think that the mentor that I made, definitely, I don't know if you all know, but Pablo Carrion, I think he's with Puente. He's someone who, any question that I have, like I just reach out to him. Then mentors that I've met along the way. At UCSB, I was part of a program called NUF under NASPA, which is basically for individuals who are pursuing a career in student affairs or higher education. So that family that I made at UC Santa Barbara was also very helpful in kind of allowing me to explore those careers a lot more and partnering me up with mentors. And I also was very fortunate to attend a conference in Portland early in the year, pre-COVID, which was really fun. And yeah, I think that it definitely, for me, along the way, has definitely been the opportunities I've been given, but also, like, as Dr. West mentioned, putting your best foot forward and just connecting with individuals. I know that at times it can be hard or intimidating, but for me, it would definitely always be Trio. But yeah.
Sounds like you're talking a lot about networking and like networking not only just in the school, but just branching out, getting involved in clubs, mentoring, speaking to people. That's a really good idea. Okay, so my next question is for Leticia again. What are the requirements of your profession? I know you answered that a little bit previously. And then what does your day-to-day job look like?
Yeah, so I'm going to speak to teaching at the high school, elementary, and middle school level, because to be a professor at the community college, you need a master's typically in whatever it is that you're teaching. But the requirements for teaching in California, at least K through 12 or TK through 12, are kind of intense, right? And I think that's something that we're pushing back against as a profession, that there shouldn't be so many requirements, because every single, one of you, or I should say a lot of folks are really, would be amazing teachers, right? So the requirements are typically, you do need a bachelor's degree. You need a credential. And so to get a credential, you typically go to a teacher credential program. Although there's programs where you can get your bachelor's and credential at the same time. There's some tests that you have to take. So the CBEST, CSET, and the RICA, which is a reading test if you're going to teach the elementary level. And so that's what we're trying to push back against, is why all of these requirements, right? Because there's a lot of folks who would make exceptional teachers, and sometimes, you know, might struggle with particular things. So, and we're also wanting to diversify the teaching profession. So what can we do to remove some of those barriers like cost and different things that sometimes get in the way of teaching? So all given that, I think it's an amazing profession, and day-to-day has changed, right, due to COVID. So now day-to-day means you're in front of a computer, but you're multitasking. Pre-COVID, it's one of those professions where you're having to make 100 decisions all at once, but you're working with kids directly, which I think that's one of the perks of it, that you'll never have a boring day. Right? You're going to be exhausted at times, but you will never go home and say, I was pretty bored today, right? And so it's grading, it's planning, it's instruction, it's all of it. And yeah, I think no day is going to be the same as the previous one. So I can't really kind of tell you exactly, but I can say that there's just a lot that goes into teaching that I think a lot of folks don't know about, but it can also be incredibly rewarding.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add to that, Dr. West?
I mute my audio. So I will do for a little bit of student affairs, because that's where I started, and then also the museum world. Particularly to piggyback on what Robert is about and has talked about, I started in student affairs as a resident advisor, then as a resident director, because that was the way that I paid for my undergraduate experience. And so what Robert has done is to talk about that the lived experiences of both paying for your undergraduate as well as getting skills is something that is both possible, probable, and you should look at. I would tell you that for the curatorial world, typically, if you're a visual art curator, in this case, I was a history curator, the minimum expectation is a master's degree. To be competitive in the field, you probably have to have a terminal degree, which is a PhD, and probably in one of the defined fields, which in this case is probably going to be art history. That will feel very, very far away. And I know that, and I get that part. I will only say the following. I completed a PhD at the age of 42 or 43, which is relatively in the middle of a life cycle. And I spent my 20s and 30s doing a range of different things, including spending 10 years in a graduate program on doing other stuff. It's doable, it's hard, but the other thing that I would say is it feels like those three letters are very far away. That's for somebody else, and it's none of those things. I walked into a graduate program. I was the probationary status with no funding at USC, which is a recipe for disaster. I worked 4 jobs my first year. This is not some woe is me or like pub me up. This is just to say, not only is it possible, not only is it probable, the 15 folks I came into our graduate program with in history, only 3 completed. And 12 of the 15 were smarter than me by a light year. So again, it has nothing to do with your brains. It has nothing to do with your intelligence. It's everything to do with just get your grind on and just simply go. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. What about you, Robert? What are your requirements for your aspiring profession? And if you know what the day-to-day looks like, you can speak on that too.
Yeah, so I would say, like for myself, currently I'm looking for entry-level positions. I would say a BA is fine, and also having some experience under your belt is really good. But as far as the day-to-day go, so I've worked with TRIO Upward Bound for the past 4 years. Every summer at UC Santa Barbara, I was an RA. I also RA'd for EOP over one summer. I was a transfer intern for Office of Admissions. So I think it really depends on the day-to-day basis. I haven't had a full-time professional role, so I can't really speak to that. But as a student working in those kind of in that field, it really ranged. Like there were times where I was on panels like this, where I talked to students, where I talked to families, where I collaborated with other resources on campus to have presentations. It's a number of things on a day-to-day basis, but I think a lot of it is interacting with students and other staff and faculties on campus and just wanting to help as that, yeah, I would say a BA for entry-level positions. You can find that. But I think that's all I have to say for requirements for my profession so far.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, so this has to do with what we're talking about. So what does social justice mean to you, and how does your specific career or career path connect you to social justice? Leticia, do you think you can answer this for me?
Yeah, it's funny because I just a little bit before our panel, I taught one of my classes, which is on Introduction to Elementary Teaching. And the topic for today was history and the history standards. And so our entire conversation is around social justice, right? So like, what are the current standards that are being taught in TK through 8th grade? Whose stories are missing, right? What's not being represented in those standards, given that we know that you know, who our students are, right? So I think with education and with teaching, whether it's college, you know, or whatever level, what you teach is political and what you don't teach is political as well, right? And so not only is curriculum embedded and connected to social justice, the teacher identity is also connected. And I think schools, if they're not careful, they can reproduce inequity, right? So they can either reproduce it or counter and challenge. And I think when we think about the current context of COVID and its disproportionate impact on communities of color, and we think about the racial kind of upburst and uprising and protests against police violence, all of it is happening in the world, and teachers can either kind of ignore it and continue to work with their students, or they can address it head on, because students are going to be asking those questions, and students are incredibly passionate and interested in having real conversations in their classroom. And so I think as a teacher, if you are excited and committed to social justice, it happens every day in your conversations and the types of assignments you give and the types of projects that you have for your students. And so I think there's no disconnect for me. I think they have to go hand in hand if you're really going to be an equity, culturally relevant teacher.
Thank you. What about you, Dr. Russ? What does social justice mean to you, and how is it connected to your current profession?
I teach African American history, and I've taught it for the last 20 years or so. I would say I'm looking for joy, and I'm looking to figure out a way of taking the narrative and demonstrating the moments. And the social justice is about finding a space for human beings to find joy in the midst of a confluence of events, which includes the mismanagement of forest land, which is resulting in the West burning, Black folks and Latino folks and of color reaching out and engaging. And finding joy is also about making sure that you're telling great stories. Two great stories. One, the narrative of the beginning of the GLBTQI movement in the United States of America is continually connected into Stonewall, yet the reality is that the individuals who are directly connected into resisting the police were trans, women of color, who are sex workers. That's the reality on the ground, which means that when we do social justice, we tell good stories, we get the ability of moving human beings to recognize that those who are the most marginalized within a society, in fact, are the place that one should be looking at, because they're going to be transformative. That is social justice. The other part of social justice in the curatorial world, there's an incredible story today about a guy by the name of Sinclair, African-American man, who helped to frame the taxidermy and tanning on the big, gigantic elephants that are sitting in the NOMA, I think, or the Met, I forgot which one it was referenced. But here is this iconographic symbol that thousands and hundreds of thousands of school children have walked by, not even recognizing that the particular set of skills and craft that was necessary to put it together was by an African-American man, and that story has been erased. These are just stories, but my point is in telling great stories, you get the ability of fracturing the narrative, of displacing the narrative, of forcing individuals to recognize the stories and the way that they have learned them are completely connected from the reality on the ground. That's what I try to do with social justice.
Wow. What about you, Robert? What does social justice mean to you, and how is your career path connected to that?
Yeah, well, those are two really good examples of what social justice means. I feel I can follow with that. I think they both made really good points. Definitely being aware of what you are teaching, what you are saying, what you are putting out there, and also making sure that this whole idea with, now that we have social media at our hands, not being performative, right? I've come across a lot of people who on social media, it can be, and it is a really good platform of decimating knowledge and material for others to have, making it accessible for others, but making sure that, you know, there's a reason for why you are doing this, and it's not just for attention. You know, sadly, there's a lot of people out there who want to put information out there on their accounts just to look good or look like they care about things, but what you actually are doing. And it's interesting when I was asked to be on the panel and I had access to the questions we were given. I was like, what does social justice mean to me? And I was looking up videos and I was looking up different meanings of it. In my short life lived, I was trying to see what is social justice in my life. And one thing that I realized for myself, at least, was that social justice looks different. It looks different throughout the years. It changes, but at the root of it, it's understanding the history, as Dr. West mentioned, which is a really good point. That, you know, social justice is contextual, but it's also understanding the roots of how things are interconnected. While I was at UCSB, I was planning to minor in African studies, and a professor by the name of I forgot his name, but he was new. He was a really good professor, and he gave us a definition of racism, and his whole structure of the class was basically to help you understand how people will try to rebuttal your idea of, like, there is no, like, racism doesn't exist. So basically the structure of his class was set up in a way that after the class you'd understand that it does exist and you'd be able to defend that point. And basically what his definition of racism after the class was dismantling all forms and structures that oppress individuals, or just, as Dr. West, like, the ability to live in a world of joy. And I think that for me, that's exactly what social justice is understanding, right? It could be at a much greater level, like understanding on a global economic, but kind of spectrum, but also understanding, like, on the individual level. What does social justice look like in your individual life or in your home? And these are, I think, conversations that I think I've had with myself, and I've been having with my family, my immediate family. But the way that I would say social justice ties into my career would be, or my career path would be, definitely being at the table and representation. I think having gone to UC Santa Barbara, which is a predominantly white institution, I saw the lack of representation in staff and faculty. And that alone was very intimidating, because it's like you don't see yourself on campus. There's no presence of individuals that look like you, and that can definitely be hindering to some and be an obstacle in your success as an overall student or just individual. But for me, it's definitely being present, like taking all my experiences and just my story, and uplifting and amplifying the voice of those who have been most marginalized.
Thank you. So my next question, this will be my last question, so we're going to wrap up soon. Is there anything else you would want to share with the students today? I'm just going to open it up, be really broad. Leticia, you can go.
Yeah, I think teaching, and I'm also going to open it up to counseling. I mean, there's so many different fields you can go in when you work with young people, right? I think it's sometimes overlooked, because we all have been exposed to teachers, right? We go to school and we've had countless teachers. And so when we're starting to think about what careers fit us and where we think we see ourselves, we often kind of overlook teaching. Like I have a lot of students in my classes who are coming around to teaching. Like they thought they wanted to do it, but they resisted it. And then years later, they're coming back to school and saying, you know what, I actually do think I want to be a teacher, right? But society and maybe there's to be frank, sometimes the working conditions have kind of said, you know, teaching is not necessarily the thing. And so people are fighting for better working conditions for teachers. I think that you can have both. You can go into a profession that isn't perfect, right? And into an institution, a system that's not perfect, and how do you change it from within? So I would say if you are interested in working with young folks, if you're interested in working with people, with communities, and you want to connect, you know, social sciences or, you know, your degree to something that's tangible, I would say teaching is a great option for folks, or counseling, being a college counselor. There's so many different ways to work with young people. And if you're interested in teaching at the college level, then that also has so many benefits. So I think just as, you know, Robert kind of mentioned, like just that professor that he mentioned, I know you didn't remember the name, but you remember the feeling, right, that he had. And so I think see yourself in that. I think that you have a place. We definitely need great teachers, and we definitely need teachers that are embedded in community, and teachers of color that I think are going to make a difference with young folks. And so hopefully, you know, you can see potentially play with that idea of teaching.
Thank you, Leticia. What about you, Dr. West? Is there anything you wanted to let students know today?
I would say take a look around, but you can't take a look around because at the moment of this recording, we're in the middle of the worst fire season, and this is not going to be a one-off. This is the direction the planet is going. I could care less about other opinions. They are not scientifically based. One. Two, it means that no matter what your plan is, there is a space for you to make a difference. You can just simply take a look around and recognize that there are individual human beings who are on the street making a decision to change the system. Engage there. That the way that we have framed it is unsustainable. We cannot continue to use fossil fuels as a vehicle to move human beings on the planet. Again, not sustainable. So you are really at a moment in which we are going to have to figure out fundamentally, we have to make big shifts. It's not a maybe or we're supposed to hope we figure it out. We have no choice. We need you. And more importantly, we need you no matter what your endeavor is, biochemistry, social sciences, no matter what your endeavor is, we need you to engage because the planet needs you. And I don't say that lightly. I don't say that to be cute. I mean that is the moment we're actually at this time, and I need you there. Whoever you are going to utilize to be able to do that, but make sure that you're connecting in with a mentor and with a professional, because to me, the most important part of my journey has been consistently individuals who said, let me tell you this, or let me a pathway here. I'll consider this as an opportunity. So please make sure that you're connecting in with folks to say, here's what I'm thinking about doing. How can you help? That would be my advice.
Thank you, Dr. West. Just before Robert goes, I just want to mention Leticia put her email in the chat for anyone who has any other further questions about teaching. And I also just sent a link in the chat that you guys can go on and fill out a survey, and the survey will enter you into the raffle to win all the prizes. But before we go, Robert, is there anything else you wanted to let everybody know today?
I would say just on to that question, like I know that I have not found or started that profession. I'm still looking for opportunities. But definitely find a way, if you haven't found your purpose, like look for that purpose. For me, like it was really hard trying to convince or tell my parents what I was studying. Like for a long time, they didn't understand it. To this day, my family doesn't understand it. Sometimes I say I'm basically a historian of Chicanos in America, and our history. But yeah, like find your purpose, and no matter where you go, always lead with that. It still gets difficult in explaining what I want to do, and I think a lot of the time they get caught up in, oh, like, how are you going to make money to support if you have a family, or if you, and it's like, I think to me, I was always kind of graduating out of high school as like, oh, where am I going to get money from? What's going to be the next move? Is this career? Is this going to be enough to provide for myself and if I have a family? But once I started being involved in joining clubs and organizations, I found that purpose and it connected me back to my community. And I think that was the most beautiful part of, I think, taking a chance and going away, because it allowed me to disconnect from everything that has been going on here in my community and experience something different. And although I did have that opportunity, it has been a privilege that not a lot of people get to have. But I would say definitely like search for your purpose, and no matter what you end up doing or the profession you go into, like always have that purpose. And no matter where you end up, like you'll have a good head on your shoulders and you know what would be the right call for you.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you again to all of the people who spoke on our panel today. So Professor Leticia Rojas, Professor Christopher West, and Robert Aceves. Don't forget, you guys, to go click on the link in the chat. You just fill out a survey and it'll submit you into the raffle to win the prizes. We'll leave the Zoom link open just until 1:45, so you guys can make sure you click on that link. But again, thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and thank you to all the panelists. We really appreciate all your insight and your time being here. Thank you again.